you. Thanks, everyone. Our next speaker, Nalin Pahalawaththa, is the Manager of Power System Analysis at TransGrid. With over 20 years' experience in the industry, Nalin provides analytical support for power system planning and investment justification. Before joining TransGrid almost 3 years ago, Nalin worked in modelling and planning management roles at AEMO and Transpower in Tasmania. Please join me in welcoming Nalin.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Before I start, actually, I find my lecture notes. Right. Um, Let me share with you a small story I heard recently. This is about disciplining children, the 2015 version. When my child was small, to discipline her, I used to ground her. Grounding came in the form of withdrawing privileges like watching TV. Probably later, the parents must have used different kind of withdrawing things. Withdrawing cell phone, withdrawing iPads, or withdrawing access to internet. In 2015, you may call your child and say that if you don't behave, I'll withdraw from you what? Your device chargers, your iPad charger, your cell phone charger. The point of the story, gentlemen, is, or and ladies, is irrespective of whether it is children or adults, we place a lot of reliance on having access to electricity. Through TransGrid high voltage network, we power the lives of people or consumers in New South Wales. We power the lives of consumers. Hence, the objective of our planning is to ensure that the consumers are supplied with a reliable supply at an economical efficient cost, while ensuring that the impact, including the safety impact on the environment, people and the societies are minimized. How do we do that, Katie? Right. The planning environment is changing. In his presentation, Peter described that how our industry environment is changing. Gerard pointed out what are the challenges we are facing. In my part of presentation, I am going to elaborate further on the challenges we are facing and the uncertainties we are facing. Then I will go into highlight how do we face these challenges. I will also highlight what changes have been happening over the last year. As you know, annual planning process is an annual process. We do planning every year and update our plans. So what I will present in there would be the what incremental changes happened over the last year in the planning arena. The need for transmission system is, and therefore the need to augment that one or to replace the existing equipment with new equipment is driven by three factors. The first factor is the demand. How big and where would be the demand in the state. The second factor is the supply. how big is the generation, and where would be that generation to supply that demand. And the third factor is the reliability. How much reliability the consumers are expecting from the transmission grid. Let's look at each by each individually. New South Wales forecast growth. This slide bit looks like the weather forecast. It's in fact, one could say that it is representative of the volatility and the uncertainty of the weather forecast, similar, but that is what we will see in the demand forecast in the future. The good part is that over the last year, the forecast demand growth was flat. There was a bit increment in the summer and winter, but that was very marginal. That was the good news. The bad news is part of our demand growth is also driven by the industry spot loads. That happens all over the state. Because of the economic uncertainty, the world economic uncertainty, whatever planned earlier didn't materialize. Whatever the load increases didn't happen. And that would, we don't know when it's going to get happen again, but it will happen. So that is the uncertainty we are working with. On top of it, some of our existing industries are old and aging. And it is to be expected some industries will reduce their demand and some industries will close down. For example, Georgina presented the last year's forecast. In that one, under the low growth scenario, EMO is expecting a major industry in New South Wales to close down in the very near future. So that is the side of the demand uncertainty. To compound the problems, the technological impact is also significant. We start with PV, while the individual PV contribution is not much, but we have seen from the previous presentation, again from EMO, that the combined effect is significant. Then it has compounded by the energy efficiency, lighting, and the energy efficient appliances at our household. That increase the volatility again and increase the uncertainty. Going into the future, we are adding electric vehicles, battery storage. What is the impact of that one? That's going to increase the uncertainty again. My biggest concern is even not that one. My biggest concern is that I don't know what is going to come after that. Let's look at the supply uncertainty. Federal government has announced a large or agree on the large renewable energy target. This is going to drive new investment in renewable energy throughout the NEM, most likely to be wind and solar. It is expected that approximately 6,000 megawatts of investment in generation on these intermittent renewable generation sources will happen in the NEM. And out of that one, it is likely that 2,000 to 3,000 megawatt of generation will be developed within New South Wales. If we look at where these things are going to happen, New South Wales in one way is fortunate because it has that kind of resources all over the state. We could see renewable generation up in the northern part near Armidale and North. That's where Peter has highlighted that we are planning a renewable hub. We already know that there's a good resources in the Canberra area, and that area could be even further developed to harness those resources. And near Broken Hill area is a good and wind resources again. So in considering these resources, these can come from 2 to 3,000 megawatts could come from any of those areas. what could happen therefore is that those resources, where it is coming, would put stress on the grid at different points. Considering supply uncertainty also is that we know that in New South Wales at the moment there is about 2,000, 3,000 megawatts of surplus generation. It is likely that the new wind and solar resource might displace some of those things. Another factor we need to consider is that at the moment we have firm coal and gas fired generation which can be relied on to supply the peak demand on a hot day in the summer. But with the introduction of wind and solar and displacing some of this firm generation, how much reliance we can place on them is a question we need to be careful about. We already have seen that some retirement of existing generation. Any further generation retirement would likely to put pressure on our grid, especially the interconnectors with the other states. Level of reliability, we have been accustomed to a good deal of reliability in our network. In other words, also the other side is that we are also mindful that this reliability is coming with a cost. So therefore we have to balance our reliability expectation with the cost expectations. New South Wales government, in preparation for our next revenue reset past 2018, has started reviewing the New South Wales reliability standard. Some of you must have attended the workshop in the morning. And what would like is that it will like to review the N-1 and the N-2 for CBD reliability standard, and it might be revised again. When we look at in this backdrop, what will happen to the existing grid? We already mentioned that there will be a flat demand over next 5 years, and that demand over the next 5 years would be less than what we have seen in the past, in particular what we have seen in 2011. Therefore, the grid is capable of handling this demand for the next 5 years, and we are not expecting a significant amount of pressure points therefore in the grid. That will, the amount of pressure points will be small. Any augmentation will be driven, any grid development therefore will be driven by replacement of or retirement and replacement of the assets or connection of new generation. As I said, there are a lot of challenges. Our response to these challenges are several fold. We have several strategies in place. There, we want to plan for uncertainty. We should now have not only plan A and B, we have to prepare plan A, B, and C, and D. We have to prepare for all the scenarios that could materialize. We also need to be reduce time required for responding or just-in-time delivery. Preparatory work done and completed where economical. Monitor and invest only when absolutely necessary, and doing only the fit for purpose investments which are likely to be small and incremental rather than big size investments. Better utilization of the existing assets. And last not least though is the better utilization of non-network solutions where it is economical. Let's look at what has changed over the last year in our planning. As I said, this is a year annual review, and so what I am going to present is only the highlights of the changes. There are much more changes, and you can read it in the APR. Earlier we were planning to replace the, we were planning to decommission the Belravan Orange 944 line, but with our recent investigation we found that by very small investment, we can postpone the life, or we can extend the life of the asset for at least in the 5 years. Tamworth Canada, supply to Tamworth Canada area. What we have found, earlier, about 6 years ago, what we were planning is actually to build a new line to the area because of the forecast demand growth. Last year, because of the reduced demand growth, we revised that plan and then thought we can do a low cost investment in the form of putting a phase shifting transformer, but use the surplus capacity on the northern side of that area to provide supply. This year we started again having another look at this one, and we haven't seen the expected demand growth. On the other hand, in the area there had been some more developments: connection of the Morris solar farm, connection of the White Rock wind farm, and taking up some of that demand. So we are expecting that we might able to postpone the investment even further until we see a certainty in the demand forecast or demand happening. Beaconsfield West. Beaconsfield West, as you know, is a critical supply point for the CBD area. Last year when we look at that one, there were 3 transformers in Beaconsfield West. 2 transformers were old and aging. We were planning to replace them. With the reduced demand in the area again, we have done the look at that, and then we found that by replacing only 1 transformer is sufficient. What we did though is that we took a small bit of risk on that one, because when N-2 kind of event happens under the worst kind of peak load, that the existing transformers could be about 104% loaded, but we think that we can manage that one through cyclic routines. Line remediation work. Earlier we identified approximately 180 lines to be remedied for their clearances. Aerial line survey found out some of those